My name's Bronwen Thomas. I'm the climate change campaigner at People and Planet, which is a national student organisation campaigning on issues of global social and environmental justice. I became a climate change campaigner through campaigning on social justice issues. So my original motivation was all about inequality. The more I know about climate change, the more I know it's going to have an effect first on the people who aren't causing it. So it feels to me like a massive issue of injustice that in the UK and in other countries where we use a lot of fossil fuels, we've created this massive problem, and the people who will really feel the effects, people in countries where they have sort of vulnerable to drought or to food scarcity or to sort of increased disease, increased conflict over resources, we're creating that problem. I think the UK is making a lot of statements about climate change, which is obviously really positive. It's a really massive issue, and the UK is to some extent leading internationally, but unfortunately it doesn't really seem to be living up to a lot of the statements it's making. We've been campaigning with Stop Climate Chaos on the climate change bill, and we think it's really great that the government has introduced the bill, but we're campaigning with the other members of Stop Climate Chaos for the target in that to be set at 80% cuts in carbon emissions by 2050 at least, on the basis of the most recent science. And we think the government is really not doing enough to push that target, because on the ground, as we can see, a whole range of things going on that really are contributing to climate change, in terms of aviation policy, in terms of policy on coal power, in terms of policy on renewable energy and tariffs, feed-in tariffs for renewable energy, in terms of funding oil and gas extraction and supporting the industry. And all these things, the government is contributing to the problem, not actually doing anything about it. People and Planet's running a campaign called Ditch Dirty Development. The campaign's all about financing for oil and gas extraction. It's part of our climate change campaigns. We focus on oil and gas extraction because it's the sort of first step in the supply chain that gets oil and gas to us, where we then consume it and contribute to global warming and climate change. So we focus on, firstly, on the government, the UK government, which uses development aid, which is supposed to be used for poverty alleviation, reducing poverty, and that aid is going to oil and gas extraction projects, mainly through institutions like the World Bank, and they lend money to oil and gas extraction, which not only has a negative effect on climate change, but is in itself, the evidence shows that oil and gas extraction has a very serious negative effect on society in those countries where they have a sort of high dependence on oil and gas. So we believe that there's no really strong development principle to fund oil and gas, and in terms of climate change, which will hit the most vulnerable people in the world, the poorest people in the world first, there's no good reason to be using development aid to fund that. And the UK could be leading in this respect. It's could be doing something internationally to say that not only the UK but other countries should stop lending to oil and gas and put that money into renewable energy instead, and also into projects that really benefit people by bringing access to energy to the poorest. We also focus on the Royal Bank of Scotland, which is one of the biggest funders of oil and gas in the British High Street. They're involved in all sorts of some of the most controversial oil and gas projects out there, such as tar sands in Canada, which is basically a form of extracting oil which is highly inefficient and produces far more carbon dioxide than conventional reserves of oil do. And the Royal Bank of Scotland has put money into that and sees that as a sort of a growth area for their business. People and Planet is a student organisation, and students are really key customers for banks. So for us, it's a really we've got a real lever where we can actually influence what the banking sector does. So I'd encourage anyone who is a customer of the Royal Bank of Scotland or of NatWest, which is also owned by the Royal Bank of Scotland, to use their influence to let the bank know that they're really unhappy with the policies they're adopting with relation to oil and gas.